Welcome to EdReady. EdReady is a free math readiness system for anyone considering attending college in the United States. If you're a high school student and you're wondering about your college prospects, or if you're a recent high school graduate and you're unsure if you're ready to get into the college of your choice, or even if you're already in college but maybe ended up in remedial classes or otherwise are told that you need to shore up your math skills, in any of these cases, EdReady is likely to be helpful for you. EdReady is free for all students. This video comprises a walkthrough of the experience that a student is likely to have in a typical version of EdReady, depending on where you are and which version you use. To get going with EdReady, you simply click the Get Started button. EdReady will then ask you to sign up for an account. This account is and always will be free. The account is strictly for the purpose of storing the data associated with yourself and ensuring that no one but you gets access to the data unless you choose to share it. After you've created an account, you might see a screen like this. In this case, we're imagining a student named Rachel Green who lives in the Seattle area, has created an account, and is going to jump into EdReady. We ask you right away to think about where you're standing in terms of your college aspirations. It's okay if you're not sure, but if you think you know where you want to go to college, you can go ahead and click to start choosing schools, and we give you the option to browse all the various schools around the country that might be interesting to you. You can sort by distance, search for schools by name. There's no requirement that you choose schools at this point, but it's helpful for EdReady to know what it is that you're thinking you might want to do. At some point, you'll finish with all this, and by the way, you can also click on these schools to get more information. Simple facts, you can actually click through the website. So this is actually also a pretty useful tool if you don't actually know about all the schools in your area or in any given area of the country. Having made those choices, you do ultimately land on a page that provides a number of different assessments that you can pursue. For example, if you know that you're going to be tested upon going to some institution on the entirety of math that you would have been expected to have learned in high school, you may want to just take an overall college math readiness assessment. On the other hand, it might be that you already know that what you really need to work on is arithmetic or beginning algebra or some other area of math. Again, depending on which version of EdReady you're using, those options may or may not be available. In this case, we're pursuing college math readiness. The assessment itself is fairly straightforward. There's nothing fancy going on here. A lot of multiple choice questions, and it won't take you more than an hour to do this initial assessment. You also have the opportunity to start and stop the assessment anytime you want. This is not really about recreating the sort of high stress exam testing situation that you're used to. The whole point of this assessment is to just figure out what you do and don't know, right? Once we have that information, EdReady can actually help you by pointing you to resources and the things you need for the material that you don't already know. A common mistake that we know students often make is that even when they know there's a lot of material they don't know, they tend to study the stuff they do know because it kind of feels good to study stuff that you feel like you understand. EdReady helps you avoid this trap and actually study the things that you really need to master. At some point, usually in under an hour, you will actually complete this assessment and get your first view of your results. What you can see here is that you got a score, or in this case, Rachel got a score of a 47. That score doesn't really mean much in this context. The EdReady score runs from 0 to 100, with 0 being the worst, 100 being the best, and so 47 is somewhere in the middle. We don't really know what that means in terms of whether there's an institution that Rachel can attend right now with that score. But that's not really the point of this screen. More interesting, and certainly worthy of an overview, is that this assessment is broken down into a whole set of units, and those units each get a score. So what we now can see about Rachel is that she's not ready for ratios, rates, and proportions, but she has some knowledge of percents, measurement, geometry, these ones that say needs review. We can also see that she actually did pretty well on a couple of these units. Whole numbers, fractions, decimals. They're flagged here as optional because that initial assessment is really too short for us to say with certainty that she has mastered it, but the signs are good, and so we account for that performance as she moves forward in EdReady. Rachel at this point can move on by clicking Study Options, and now she sees what this score means. So here what you can see is Rachel's score 47, and down here a listing of the schools that Rachel chose back at the beginning. Some of these schools, these ones down here, she's ready for. In other words, this score of a 47 is already higher than the cutoff or score expectations that these schools have set for incoming college students. And so if Rachel wants to go to one of these schools, as you can see, she probably doesn't need to study at all. She's likely to go to those schools and either just be straight up admitted or certainly do well enough, or I guess I should say likely do well enough, on any placement exam they put in front of her that she would be able to get into college level credit bearing courses immediately and not waste time, money, and frustration in remedial classes. Up here, here's a couple of schools that she chose that she's not ready for. Seattle University, Green River Community College, and University of Washington all have target scores that are higher than her score of 47. Rachel can toggle these universities to change the target score and therefore change the distance between her score of a 47 and basically the target she's trying to reach. And EdReady then adjusts its estimate of the amount of time Rachel should expect to put in at a minimum to actually achieve the mastery of the additional material that was required to take her score of 47 and raise it to whatever the target might be. Just because these scores have targets higher than her should not be discouraging. That's the whole point of EdReady, is to identify where she stands and then give her the help that she needs. And she can get that by clicking Go to Study Plan. When she clicks through and Go to Study Plan, she sees a study plan that is literally built just for her. So what you see is her score, 47, the target score she chose of 80, and lined up between the two like stepping stones are all the units which she needs to better master to raise that 47 to an 80. Notice there are some units here that we know she has not yet mastered, but that she probably doesn't have to master, because by mastering these units in purple, she can actually get that score to an 80 without ever having to have fully mastered everything in the curriculum. Of course, if she had chosen a higher target score, then a couple of these units would have been in purple in between. And so you sort of get the idea of how EdReady is trying to find the most efficient path to getting the target score you need to get going in the college of your choice. Having gotten here, she now is in a position where she can study and test herself through these materials so that we can really figure out where she stands, and ultimately can click through to resources that we provide for free that she can use to master the material. The default resources are resources that our own nonprofit organization, the NROC Project, already pushes out for free to students all over the world. These resources have been heavily tested in many different situations, and students seem to really benefit from them. The version of EdReady that we will be pushing out in early 2014 will include not just these resources, but many other resources besides from all kinds of different providers around the world, especially open educational resources that we can guarantee will be free for everyone to access. These resources include additional questions for practice, and also video lessons, worked examples, and a variety of other things. Once Rachel studied this resource, which you can see is specific to the topic that she needed to know, in this case simplifying ratios and rates, she can return to EdReady, retest herself using one of the retest buttons, and hopefully master that topic. As she masters material, the units and the topics in that unit move off to the right and get flagged as having been mastered. You can see here that I'm showing you a intermediate stage as Rachel has slowly mastered this material and raised her score. And as she passes benchmarks in the schools that she's chosen, it'll get flagged for her. So EdReady is pointing out that because she's done some solid work and has mastered more of the material, she's actually now ready for Seattle University. That is, she's now ready for a college that she was not ready for in the beginning. She can keep going to get to that 80, or maybe at this point she's thinking, well, Seattle University looks pretty good. I might stop right here. If she does keep going, we will congratulate her once she's actually eclipsed her designated target score. In this case, the target score of 80 for Green River Community College. That, in a nutshell, is EdReady. Having achieved this target, we would say that it's highly likely that Rachel can now enroll in Green River Community College or any other college that she might apply to, assuming she gets in. She might find herself still asked to prove her math readiness. And given the experience that she's had here in EdReady and the performance gains that she was able to demonstrate, it seems highly likely that she would end up doing very well on any placement exam they might put in front of her, and will be able to avoid any developmental or remedial classes entirely, at least for math. EdReady will also include developmental English as soon as late 2014, likely in 2015. So stay tuned, and you will see EdReady become a complete college readiness system, not just for math, but also for English, and who knows, in the future. EdReady, if you want to be really ready, check out EdReady. Thank you.